Thanks, Sam. So should I just assume that's working and doing its job, the mic? Yeah, that's good? The mic, it's doing its thing. Okay. Well, thanks everybody for coming out on a summer evening. I'm really excited to see you all here, and I want to thank Sam, who curated this and hung it so beautifully and lit it so beautifully, and also Ava, and all that Ava does for our community. So I really feel like I've just been treated so beautifully here, and I really appreciate it. And I love how you hung the show and where you put it, and I just think you had a great vision for all three artists. So let's see. I had the idea of this is my piece of notes, kind of having three different things I'm going to talk about, it just sort of subject headings, and then I'll try to remember to pause periodically, just so I'm not talking the whole time, and if you have questions you can ask them and get my attention. I'm happy to have it more like a conversation rather than me just blah blah blahing the whole time. So some of you, I don't know, a thing that Ava has been doing lately is asking the artists to do a video studio tour. So all three of us have done one, and it's playing on a monitor in just right there. So some of you may have seen that, and in which case there may be some repetition involved in this. But if not, I just encourage you to also just to kind of hear some of what the other artists have sang and sing inside their studio and stuff. So let's see. I guess the title of the show is Mashup, and I wanted to read a quote. Recently I was down looking at colleges with my daughter. We were in Washington, D.C. We were at American University, and there was a show there that was launched by the National Museum of Women in the Arts, and it was called Positive Fragmentation. And it was all women, and it was all sort of collage-based art. Another theme of that was multiples, so some of them were prints. But it was such a great show, and it was such a surprise, because it was like, here are all these women that are kind of like thinking in sort of similar terms as I am, and it felt like, oh, these are my people, But I wanted to, in the catalog was this phrase that caught me by Lucy Lepard. So she's a feminist art critic, and she talked about how a collage artist willfully takes apart what is or is supposed to be and rearranges it in ways that suggest what could be. So I just love that description, because I feel like on some level what I'm talking about is just how we're all just sort of a mashup of all these things. And yet at the same time, we're greater than the sum of all our parts, and we are each a whole. And so I'm kind of thinking about that in terms of when I'm making collages, but also bringing that into the three-dimensional world. So I want to talk a little bit about the process and materials first. So what you're kind of seeing here is really three different processes. Collage, obviously, which is paper, mostly found paper, some fabric, and then you're seeing welded steel sculptures, and then the third process is painting. I'm going to pause there to say something, put him on the spot. The person who taught me how to weld is in the audience today. Right there, that man, John Lee. And the person who taught me how to make a collage essentially is no longer with us, Roshan Bogosian. But the late great. And the two of you really just kind of just hooked me on this stuff. But in terms of collage, when I'm approaching it, I realized as I was kind of thinking about like, well, what if I'm zooming out from this whole show, what are, there are certain themes, but what are some real through threads, and one of which is really color. And I feel like when I'm approaching a collage, I kind of have, like, my starting point is like, okay, like, what's the palette? How do I think about the palette? Well, what am I feeling? Like, how are my feelings expressed through color or a combination of color? So, like, for example, that one in the back is called Spring Ephemerals. And it was made in spring. And it's this, all of us are in the Upper Valley. We know what it feels like when spring finally rolls around and we survived it. And it's just, it's exuberant, And so I really wanted to have a springy palette, and it's just this, the pinks, the greens, the yellows. This feels like more of a fall palette. But I think that one of the things that just is exciting for me to think about is like, how am I feeling? How am I going to get that down in color? But I have a really big trove of found paper just accumulated over the years. And so what I try to do with these collages is not really think about it too much beyond that. I'm like, that's my jumping off point. And then I'm like, let's park the brain elsewhere and just kind of let my hands do the thinking and just try to work as quickly as I can, which is really why I love the medium of collage. And yeah, just get my head out of the way and just and have that be sort of almost an automatic thing to do. Sort of similarly, as I get more comfortable with welding, and I wouldn't call myself a welder's welder. I'm definitely an artistic welder. I'm not doing any bridges. I'm not going to do your barbecue, but I just try to like not think about it too much. So steel, totally different than paper, right? Those two, like, don't even get them next to each other. They'll mess each other up. But you can really work fairly quickly with steel. And I mean, it's just this amazing material. If you add heat, it can bend, you can stick it together, and you can just, it can feel like it can defy gravity. And so I love the thought of trying to work with steel in a way that I also work with collage, which is not really in my head so much as just maybe I'll think of, well, what form am I trying to get at? And similar to the collage, it's never exactly what's in your head. It's like you start and it's like, oh, it's different. And then you're responding to the material in the moment, and I really like that process. So then the third process is painting, which is relatively new for me. But as I said in the studio tour video, another Dartmouth person, Enrico Riley, who was in my class, we did years ago, I took some work to his studio and we were talking about stuff, and he was looking at stuff and he's like, well, how about if you try to get the collage and the sculpture closer together? And I just had that like little thing playing in the back of my mind for the past few years. And I think that for me, the leap was when I just realized I could paint on steel. And so I have, but painting is just, it's a totally different process, and it's a little bit, it's slower, it's more meditative, but I guess I just like how these three different ways of working allow me to work differently. So, and I can work through different ideas in the same sort of format. So, for example, these two paintings, the one, or not paintings, but the sculptures, the one there and there, one is called Color Study for Main Landscape 1, and the other is Color Study for Main Landscape 2. And for those, I was literally just sitting on the rocks and with my paint palette and trying to match what I saw kind of out in front of me and just painting it onto the sculpture. So that's one sort of thing to do with this combination of processes and materials. And then things have evolved, and I can talk a little bit about that further on. I'm going to pause there. Does anyone have any questions? Yeah.
Do you paint them after you do the sculpture? And then
Oh
you
yeah.
paint the whole thing?
Yeah. So, because it's a process that involves heat, I have to make the form first, and then I prime it, and then I paint it, because you can't, once you start painting it, you can't heat it back up again.
How do you get out
So,
inside those little nooks and crannies?
my chiropractor would have something to say about it. I am kind of like doing this. And I feel like, well, maybe I'll figure out a different way of doing it, but I haven't so far. This piece actually, is the only piece in the show that I also used spray paint. So, because I wanted to try to get coverage in blocks. But then, I've heard that you can actually match colors and get spray paint made up. But then, what colors? I don't know what colors I'm going to use, so I can't just like take every color, give me a match set. So I picked a few off of the little screen, but they weren't really the colors I loved, so I worked back into it. But yeah, you got to do all the welding first. I'm noodling around with ideas of painting steel first pieces and then assembling, but I haven't gotten there yet. Yes. Oh. Well, I mean, as you know better than most people in this room, Tricia, not all of my time is spent in the studio. A lot of time. Our sons play lacrosse together, and we're logging a lot of hours in the car, driving to lacrosse tournaments. But I try to have set studio times. But I mean, this took several months. I started it, well, I actually made the form first, and then I think I primed it, and then I just sat there and looked at it for a while. And then I said, I got to get some color on it. And then I spray painted it and put it up in the studio and sat there and looked at it for a while. And I actually had people in the studio at that time, a lot of people really liked it, but it wasn't the palette that I wanted. And so this is a good time to insert that I work with a critique group. So 5 of us women get together roughly once a month, and each month we go to one person's studio and have a critique of the work we're working on. And I think it was Rachel Gross, one of the women in my group, who said, well, why couldn't you just paint back into it? So I was like, oh yeah, duh, of course I could. So that's kind of how this piece evolved. But I mean, sometimes it's not. Sometimes you got to just let it chill on the wall for a while before you can figure out what the next step is. Oh, thanks. Yeah.
So once the form is set in your mind, or once you start just the form, can you undo parts of it if you want to? I wasn't clear.
I can if I haven't painted it yet. Yeah. So this,
You do it after you paint it.
because heating it up will just burn the paint.
I see. Okay.
And just to back up and be more clear, what this started out with is just a flat sheet of steel. So I'm taking an oxyacetylene torch and cutting out. Basically, it was like, actually this one I gave myself like a little challenge, like, can you just, what happens if it's all just one piece, And so I just cut all this stuff out from one piece of like 4x8, and then just kind of like crunched it up. And I like doing that part. I mean, I crunched it up you can do it with your hands. It's physical, and then you're tired, and you got to wait. But then I go back in and then kind of tack pieces together with my torch, so it has a little more integrity. Yes?
Ever work with pieces of copper?
In John Lee's class I did way back when, but I haven't since. Yeah. No, I'm pretty like vanilla when it comes to my welding prowess. It's really straightforward. Yes, Ashton.
What does burnt paint look like?
Yeah, black and sooty. I don't know. I try not to do it.
Have you ever tried to like see if you could strategically burn paint? Like,
I have not. Although this piece is the only piece in the show where I left some pieces of the steel not painted. And I mean, steel in and of itself is beautiful. So it's kind of like, why are you painting it? It's gorgeous, you know? And I love how this has color. And when you heat it, you know, you'll get different variations of color. But I feel like that might not be good for my health. So, okay, I want to keep on my little thing what I'm talking about. Okay. Oh, next thing I want to talk about is forms. So when you're a painter, you're working on 2D and you may be creating space in terms of like the visual effect of space. But when you're a sculptor, you're actually working in 3D. And I really like to work, I like how, I like the interplay of 2D and 3D. So for example, in most of my collages, you'll see also like something photographic. So you're going to see something that's deeper space, because I like this idea of like, oh, here's a photograph, which is a 2D representation of something three-dimensional, and then if I put it on, if I put it flat again, it becomes flat again, and then if I make sculpture out of it, then it's back into 3D. And this interplay between 3D and 2D I think is really cool. And if you step back from the fact that we're like still in the midst of this ridiculous pandemic, I shouldn't say ridiculous, but we're still in this thing. If you step back from that, to me, I feel like the headlining story of our time right now is still the internet. I really do think, or the smartphone, I still think that like that's a defining thing of our time. And so I really like to think about how I feel like for artists, whether we want to or not, the work that we're making is a reflection of our time, and whether we're doing it consciously or not. And so I just feel like, though, consciously in some ways, I want to make sculpture because I want to make stuff that's 3D, because I feel like our world is super flat, and I just want things to be like real, like tactile. You got to walk around it. You may be the largest percentage of people that sees this stuff in real life. Most people would experience this on a screen. So, but I like the fact that they're in space. And I like to think about how we're being affected by the kind of ubiquity of flatness right now. But in terms of form, so as a sculptor, you're dealing with form. And one of the forms that I've been kind of enamored of lately, as you may be able to figure out, is this sort of cloud-like form. And again, back to my critique group, that piece on the back of the wall is also based on, is based on a collage, but the collage is in a rectangle. And it's a larger format. It's not in this show, but again, my critique group, somebody said, well, why does the collage have to be in a rectangle? And I was kind of like, oh yeah, it doesn't. It does not. And so I was like, then you're free of this rectilinear space, and you're able to do whatever you want. And I really love the cloud form because there's three things I think is kind of funky about the cloud form. One being like, the cloud, how we all have our information in the cloud. Like, what is the cloud? We don't even really know what it is, but we know it's out there, right? And then the other thing is just how clouds are they're protean. They're not fixed. They're always, even if it's not very windy and they look like they're fixed, they're moving, they're shifting, they're changing, as are we all. And I like the idea of these being just like a snapshot of something that's going to move. And the third thing is, I have a practice of reading the Bible, and sometimes you'll hear God referred to as speaking from a cloud. And I just always thought that was so kind of mysterious. And I also have a meditation practice, and there's a 14th century text, the Cloud of Unknowing. I think it's even written by, they don't know who's it's written by, it's anonymous. And just this, to me, the cloud also just it has a spiritual underpinning, just more about the mystery, like we can't know, we don't know what, this space in which we're existing in the space of unknowing. So that's why I like the cloud form. And then another form that's happening in this show is, I think of it as a world form, even though that's kind of a loose definition. So if you look at these two sort of freestanding ones, and also that roundy collage on the wall, which that one I sort of think of as a study for this piece. When I was thinking about that piece, because it makes sense to make things that are on the wall, and that's how we can understand how they might fit in our lives, in our house. But as a sculptor, like it's so tempting, or maybe that's not the right word, to make things that are really in the round, really you can walk around. And so this piece, I started thinking about it in terms of, well, what do we have in our lives that's not huge, but that is in the round? And I thought of a globe. And so I was sort of thinking of this as almost like a globe, and I was making this during the summer of 2020 when, we're in the thick of COVID and also George Floyd, and it felt like we were coming apart. It felt like we were, but I was like, but we need to hold together. We need to, and so this is sort of elegiac for what we were going through at this time. And I talk about this in the video, so this may be a repetition for those who've seen it, but what I did with this piece in particular is just, like probably many of us, we went outside and sought solace in this beautiful place where we live. And I would take my phone and I would walk around, and if I saw something that was incredible, I would take a picture of it, and I have a file in my albums that's, sculpture, and then I have some subcategories like leaves and fungus and stuff like that. And so the color palette for this sort of was inspired by a globe, but also was inspired by these images that I have on my phone. So these are from leaves, also leaves, sky, turkey feathers, campfire, shells, milkweed pod. This is that color. Greens are so hard to get, but I was thinking about the color of, like when you're looking at a stream and the light's hitting it, and it's the silt on the side, not the middle of the stream, but the edges where it somehow gets deposited. It's that kind of clayish looking color. So this sort of notion of the world or worlds is something I'm thinking about too, and also in these two. And I'd like to think this is where I'm going next, is just creating space, because as sculptors we get to actually make space, and so that's something that's exciting to me. I'm going to pause there. Sherman?
I'd love to have you say some things about shadow. Shadows are all black and white.
Yeah.
These are very colorful, but the black and white behind them. In some cases it's quite sharp. In some cases it's quite fuzzy. It's an interesting mix.
Yeah. So this may disappoint you, but I didn't think about it at all. I really didn't. And I think that's like, I knew that they would cast shadows, but the light in my studio is not gallery lighting, which I think I should have some gallery lighting in there, but I don't. And so it doesn't really cast shadows. And so that was just kind of like a happy accident of getting the work out of your dusty studio and, getting it all in order and hanging it in the gallery and well lit. And then these things are like, oh wow, that's a bonus. Yeah, big time. Some artists, Sheila Pepe, it comes to mind, make sculpture with the thought of what the shadow is going to be.
This one has no shadow.
That's right, because of the lighting.
Right?
Yeah, well, it's on the ground.
I can't see it.
But I guess just saying that is, I just want to say, maybe some of you heard me say this before, but the real gift of having work in this context is the things that happen that you don't expect. And not only that, but I put the work up there. Jen, you were talking about this, and then I'm not in the picture anymore, and you, the viewer, is interacting with the work, and the relationship is between you and the work, and it's not about me at all. And I love how people may come to me and say, oh, were you thinking of this, or did you notice this? Nope. So I love how it takes on a life of its own. Anybody else? Okay, well, I do have, how are we doing for time? Whoa, we're close. Well, I guess maybe I'll just talk about sort of where I am right now in terms of the more recent things that I'm doing. And again, I talked about this a little bit on the video, but so during COVID, one of the things that happened, as you all know well, is that we were grounded. We couldn't go anywhere. We were kind of housebound, and although some of us were lucky enough to be able to be outside, but I started really reflecting on where I'm from, which is, because I couldn't go there, which is the West Coast. And I grew up outside of Seattle, and my parents are still there. I have a brother there, lots of family there. I try to get there in normal times frequently, and I really think of myself as kind of like a West Coast artist, weirdly, even though I've spent more than half of my life here. But I realized, how can you think of yourself as a West Coast artist? You're like living in Vermont. I'll never call myself a Vermonter, but your kids are from Vermont, you live in Vermont, and yet you feel like you're, have allegiance or real poles in these two different places. And then I just thought about that whole concept of how just being pulled in two different places, and how a lot of us feel like we're in two different worlds. Oh wait, I'm going till 6:30.
Yeah.
Oh boy, I better slow down. Take more questions. So let's talk about this piece, because I do talk about it in the video, but so in this piece, I was really thinking about these two worlds that I'm occupying. So not only is it East Coast, West Coast, it's really me living out in Barnard, Vermont, and me really loving to be in the city, and me being really fed by the energy and what I see all around me when I go to a city, but also being really fed by the beauty that I find in nature. So this is what I'm trying to mash up in this piece. This is the most recent piece in the show. So I feel like this is kind of like where I left off, and where I'm, what I'm jumping off from when I get back into my studio. And so you'll see natural stuff. So I've got, this is from fungus. This is me trying to get those elusive greens again, but the greens in particularly the Ottaquiche River. You know how in the springtime when the rivers are high and it gets that kind of milky color, but it's like light green, but it's you don't really think, oh, that's watercolor. No, it's its own like special kind of green, and it's a hard green to get. And I don't know if I really did, but I was trying to think of the river then. This little section right in here, which you won't all be able to see, but you can come around to see, is from a Jack in the Pulpit. Does everybody know what a Jack in the Pulpit is? So one of the things I love about spring is spring ephemerals. And spring ephemerals, most of you probably know this, but for those of you who don't, there's a certain class of flower that comes only during the spring, and they're ephemeral because they rely on the light that is there when the leaves have not come out to create the shade. So they're this like super precious, I think, and I get really excited about seeing them. Plus, my birthday is March 21st, so I consider myself a spring person. But Jack in the Pulpits, I think they must be related to, they almost look like a calla lily. And they have this like hood, but if you gently pull them up, they have this just amazing little, and they have a little pokey thing, but they have this amazing pattern in there. And you don't come across them that often, but when you do, you just feel like you found a treasure. So I had to throw that in there. And let's see, what are some other natural references? Oh, these are more leaves. And then urban references. So this is, the title of this piece is called Ha Ha at the Cha-Cha. And if you come over here, sorry to be in your realm, but you'll see this is the piece that it's based on. It's it's a guy in a Mexican wrestler hat or mask, and there's this so I have this thing that I like to do when I'm in cities, which is collect paper. And when I go home, there's this particular street in Seattle where they have these, there'll be a telephone pole, and people will, get their staple gun and staple up the show poster, like, come see this concert, come or whatever. But they don't, when it's over, do they take it down? No. They just put more on top of each other. So you'll see these posts that are like bulbous, and they've got just layers and layers and layers. So I will sometimes surreptitiously just peel back the most recent stuff because you don't want anybody to not get to see something, but then just collect paper. And so I found this one one poster from a show that was at the Ha Ha Lounge in Seattle. It's a comedy series called the Cha-Cha Lounge. The comedy series is called the Ha Ha at the Cha-Cha. So the series of posters that they did were all of the comics that they had in the posters were wearing Mexican wrestler hats. And I just feel like that's hilarious. Like, and also like, there's something so Seattle about it. There's something so like goofy. Like what? Like why are Mexican wrestler? What? Like the Cha-Cha Lounge? Like it has like a goofy, lighthearted playfulness that I sort of think of as being more West Coasty. But anyway, so I just love that image. So that made it in there. And then this is from graffiti. So like, driving along with my daughter looking at colleges. By the way, it is, surprise, surprise, the only colleges that she's applying to are in cities. That was her main criteria. Like, it will be in a city. So we're driving along, I'm driving along, like, Genevieve, take a picture of that. And it's this like cool graffiti. So yeah, she gets it. And then that's making its way into this green section. And this is from, actually this little guy that looks like camo is camo. But it's from, if you look at that, you can see that little piece of camo there. Those are those fireworks that look like tanks that, you can light and they just go psh, psh, psh. Anyway, so I have two boys. Had a lot of those in our retinue. This is also from a show poster. And then this piece is actually from a piece of artwork in the Church of the Advent in Boston, which is where my son was baptized. And side fact, not so fun fact, he was born 3 days after September 11th, and we were living in Boston. And what a weird time to bring a child into the world. But I think that was kind of what got us thinking about not living in a city, moving up here. That's kind of giving you a sense of what's going on in what I'm thinking of in terms of these dualities. But I like to think that in some ways we all have dualities. We all may be living in two worlds, or not quite feel like we fit in one, or feel like we should fit in one but we don't, or so I just think that, to me, it's interesting, and it's a fruitful thing for me to be thinking about. I'm going to pause, see if anybody has any questions.
I just wanted to say that the shadow was sort of, the second self of the piece.
Oh,
The shadow self.
interesting.
So the duality.
Yeah. That's cool. And also how it didn't really reveal itself until it was in a public space, That's cool. Yeah.
I am glad you mentioned the clouds. Because when I came into the room, I thought it was all horizontal. And I thought, what would it take to turn it so it's vertical? And I looked at it and said, no, they are meant to be that way. They really were, because when you did it, that's how you saw it. And it definitely would not work the way they are right now as a vertical piece. So you would really have to start as a vertical piece. Make it.
Yeah.
And I love, I am very attracted by the color and the shape, and it's very, very nice to see. I enjoy the show very much.
Thank you.
Yes. And definitely the shadow adds another dimension. I noticed that too, yes.
Yeah.
Do you replicate, do you hand paint on the steel? Or is it like paper on the steel?
That's a good question. Yeah, it is painted. And so I was looking at that poster, or I had a photograph of it, and for example, but I mean, the nice thing is that nobody really knows if I get it right, so it's kind of loosely based, and I don't worry about whether it's perfect or not. But anybody else? Question? Yeah.
Just a real question now. How do you know that it's finished?
Oh, yeah, good question. Well, these are easier because they're all painted. They're done. But the collage, yeah, I don't know. It's actually, I don't know. It's not a conscious thing. Do you remember, I think it was, would it have been Rosemary Beck that came to Dartmouth? And I remember one thing that she said to me. I had made a collage, and she said, you have a sense of doneness. So I don't know. It's just kind of like, it's just, yeah, I guess it's just kind of feels done, is done, yeah.
You're over it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that is one really nice thing also between working in sculpture and collage, is that, these can go pretty quickly, and these can last months and months. And it's nice to have something that has, both something you can finish quickly and something that is more sustained. I'll talk about this one a little bit, just because I'm standing next to it. But so this one was a little, and this one maybe I had a hard time thinking, is this done? Because I wasn't ever totally sure. But this was a little different in that, as I mentioned, I used spray paint, and also then I wasn't, I wanted to try, I wanted to try working on this more, not like, okay, I'm always going to be looking at something else as a reference, but more, let me try to just generate some of these color combinations just out of my head. And so that was going on, but then some stuff crept in, because to me, you know, there is like a kind of a aquatic feel to this a little bit, and to me this is my little kind of like a Northwest reference, because when we would go, you know, Seattle is right. You're on salt water a lot, and they, as a kid, if we'd go to the beach, we would always find bull kelp is what it's called, and so to me, like this sort of reminded me of kelp, and so I didn't have any kelp in front of me, but I, you know, Google bull kelp, and then looking at images, and then just kind of that part was from there. This little section with the orange, so I actually had spray painted it orange and yellow, and then wasn't loving it, and so I wanted to change it, but I ended up, you know, as you can see, leaving some of those little loops, and to me that's a reference to drawing, because I'm a big mind map maker, you know, as a method of note taking. I think I learned it in middle school or something like that, because I don't think I'm a very linear person. Maybe that's obvious. But I when I'm like thinking of something, or even just taking notes in class or something, it'd be a lot of circle line, and I love that form, and I love how words and language can kind of take on this form. So to me, that was a reference to drawing. And then I realized as I was working on this that, one of the things that I love about collage and using found paper is the text. It doesn't necessarily have to say anything, but I just love the graphic nature of letters and font. And I love how when you go to a city, the font is different than if you're out here, you know, you don't see a lot of font. You don't even see billboards. But I realized I was kind of missing the letters. And so these bits of font in here and graphics are taken from my poster collection. And the title, which is called New Issue, No Cover. You see no cover here, and then back here is New Issue. And it was from a poster that was, it was like one of these crazy handmade posters where it's flat, you know, it's flat, it's been Xeroxed, but you can tell it was like actually kind of made from somebody cutting and pasting stuff and then taking a photocopy of it. But it was like leftist zine, new issue, you know, come to our opening of the magazine release party, no cover. And it was just like, I love that energy of the city. Like, what is this leftist zine? What are they writing about? Who, you know, what is this energy that's bubbling up that they're, you know, and I feel like that's the kind of thing that walking along, you may see this, you're not going to get it in a different medium. You're only going to get it because there was that poster on the wall. So I really like the immediacy of that. Anybody else? Questions?
I have a question.
Yeah.
When I first sat down here, I looked at that and thought, is that steel or is it torn paper? Because the feeling about the edges of it is the same. I didn't know until you mentioned that it was steel.
Cool. I like that. Yeah. To me, I totally groove on that. I like how they can look like each other. And I like also how you may not know what that is right off the bat. Another small fun fact, does everyone, well, hypertherm, I learned relatively recently, was the inventor of this technology that's called plasma technology. And some people have termed the Upper Valley the Plasma Valley, because it was the invention of this technology. And I do not use the technology, but I'm thinking I might. Because everybody who knows about welding, whenever they see this stuff, they're like, oh, do you use a plasma cutter? And I say, no, I don't. But I think it would be cool to use a technology that's considered like a local technology. So that's something that's in my mind. And I think with a plasma cutter, you'll still get that edge, right? No, it'll be cleaner. So yeah, so I don't know. Maybe I won't. Because I kind of like the drippy edge.
It'd be nice to have a combination though,
Yeah.
the straight edge and the...
Although, as you'll see, not a lot of straight lines in this show. Yeah.
Try a plasma cutter. We have one in the cultural studies.
Oh.
The Piper donated. We have two.
Very nice. Yeah. Okay, cool.
And similar to what someone said about the edges seeming like paper, to me, I thought some of it looked like leather.
Cool. Oh, I like that. I like incorporating fabric. There's not a lot in these collages, although this old nightgown. And I think that I kind of, I think I was looking for this, I was looking at a photograph of fabric from I ripped it off a poster. Like, you know, like if you go to New York, the posters are not, I mean, a lot of it is just, you know, these huge advertisements essentially. So some of it, when you get in close and you might just rip a small corner off of it and look at it, it's quite pixelated. But that I think was like a tweed. But I do really like the tactileness of fabric, and so I like the idea of leather too. That's cool. Yeah.
Can I ask another question?
Yeah.
I love the way they're attached to the walls. We can't see the attachment. They're floating like clouds, except for this guy.
Yeah.
And he has a chain that is to die for.
Oh, thanks.
He's created. And the attention goes from that crazy chain down to that rusty hook. And then the beautiful thing about it, I think it's a great combination.
Thanks. Well, you can thank Sam, because Sam was in the
Like your chain?
Yeah, I made the chain, but I wouldn't have had Sam not said, have you ever thought about hanging that from a chain? Because I have a stand for it, but I wasn't super happy with the stand. I tweaked the stand, I'm feeling better about it, but then I made the change just to see if I liked it, and I do like it. It's funny about that chain, I thought, like, you know, if whenever you're doing something repetitive, you kind of get into a rhythm and you sort of start, you figure out, okay, what's the most efficient movements to do this, to make it again and again and again, like knitting or something. And I thought, okay, well, I'll make a few of these chain links and then I'll kind of get into a rhythm, because I'm using welding rod, so it's a long, essentially thick wire kind of, and but that never happened. I felt like I made every single link of the chain differently. I don't know, but I just was kind of like, I don't know. It was not a very, as evidenced by how it looks, but it was just, and I didn't want it to be regular, but it was kind of like I just was waiting for the rhythm to kick in, but it's like, nope. Lisa, were you gonna?
Yeah, I was just gonna ask you, I think early on when you were talking, you mentioned that you don't mix the metal with paper in your pieces. Can you explain why you don't do that?
Well, I guess I should correct myself, because in 2016 when I had a show here at Ava, a lot of my pieces in the show were a combination of metal and paper. And it is a pretty cool combination. But I was thinking about, you know, when you get paper in space, it's pretty fragile. And I was just thinking about longevity. And so that was kind of the limitation. I didn't want to be worrying about the paper and its fragileness. It's okay when it's flat, but once you get it, and you know, ultimately these I couldn't bear the idea of them being framed for the show because I wanted them to exist with the sculptures, but I think ultimately they would be framed. You know, they kind of need, they're like any work on paper, they need, you know, some kind of protection. Yes, Jay?
It's funny that you use the word fragile, because as when people were mentioning that this kind of looks like leather, this kind of looks like paper, I was really struck by how some pieces look so fragile, and yet you know they're made out of metal. They're actually very sturdy. They also have this airiness, but also this solidity. And then you have this pointy parts, but there's also, you know, a flow to all of them. So you just mix that, you know, all these different dichotomous ideas together into several pieces. It's really amazing.
Thanks. Yeah, I love that about steel. It has that the ability to just
take all the yins and all the yangs.
The longevity of it as well, as opposed to having it in leather or something.
Yep.
Something I think is a piece of art you would want to see.
Yeah. Yeah, it's, you don't have to worry too much about it. Yeah. Well, no. But also, and these are all indoor pieces. They're not treated. Although that the one in that shiny guy is an enamel, which probably could be outside, but it's not. One other thing I just wanted to point out, this just kind of like just a little aspect is in the collages. Does it happen? Maybe yes, maybe in the later sculptures a little bit, but more so in the collages. I try to incorporate some element of the figure, and just to locate a human in the work in some way. And it's pretty, like, it can be pretty obscure. Like, well, that guy, you'll see the Mexican wrestler mask, but also there's some, that black and red is hair. And there's also this, that's the side of somebody's head right there in the orange and black, that line. And then in here, there's like, there's like just a little arm and neck right there. And then you can see in this one, we've got a foot and another body piece there and there. So just like, I don't know, you can usually find some reference to somebody in there. Anything else? Other questions? Let's see. Just another thing you'll sometimes see is I'll tuck in Seattle references, like, for example, you'll see like that Seattle. I try not to make it overt, but it's like my own inside joke. And then and this guy, that's a ferry, which is something that is ubiquitous if you're in the downtown Seattle. Ferries going across the Sound. I signed them on the back. Yeah.
Did you sign the sculpture?
This one is I think I signed this one on the back too. Yeah. Yeah. I feel like, I don't know. I don't know if this guy is signed. I don't know if I could figure out where to sign it.
It's kind of your own signature, right?
Yeah.
You can't really replicate it. So, it's unique in itself.
Yeah, please.
The sculpture that painted, what did that start as? Was that also 4x8 piece of steel and you welded it and then...
Yep. Yeah.
And then you painted.
Yep.
You still managed to, how did you do that? And obviously you've already told us that, but it's incredible.
Thanks. In between texts of wait, when are we picking him up again? Did you hear they moved the practice? Yeah. Yeah, I guess maybe the fragmented nature of this is a reflection of the fragmentation of what it is to be a mom. It's like you can't it's not that easy to maintain, super long attention span for any given time.
It's not really well, so it's a good example of what we're trying.
Well, one thing that Sam, you mentioned I went to the New York Studio School. I did a year there after I graduated from college, and I met a woman there who's a painter. Her name is Megan Chase, and she lives in Belfast, Maine. She's an amazing painter. Kind of like almost like Bonnard, Vuillard, like super textural landscape pieces. And her family owns Chase's Daily, which is a vegetarian restaurant right in Belfast. And during the summertime, she paints in the winter, but in the summertime she's growing all the vegetables. And then they have like a CSA pickup in the restaurant, which is also a gallery. It's an amazing space. You should go there if you're ever in Belfast, Maine. But I remember looking at some of her work, because she had a show hung in that space, and asking her about some of the pieces. And she's like, in this piece I was trying to cram as many colors as I possibly could into one painting and still have it look okay. And so that's kind of like one of the challenges that I was working on with this. It's just like, can I get, like, what is harmonious? What is disharmonious? Like, is this too many colors? So I don't know if it's successful, but I kind of like how many different colors there are in here. And when we were going around talking about it, and you notice how I didn't say anything about this, that was towards the end. And it's just like, dang it, I just need some blue. Like, just paint blue there. Like, no reference, whatever, just like blah, like a little bit of open space. So.
How do you choose how full they are? Like, this is pretty empty in the middle. Is that just like, do you really consciously think about that? Like, how do you know whether it's a hollow piece?
Yeah.
Or like a really solid one?
Yeah, that's a good question, because it's like, I don't know. I don't think I have really in so much in the past. I mean, sometimes I think, oh, I want something that's a little airier, like this guy and this guy. And like that one, I just wanted it to look really collagey. And that one I was just kind of like, I just wanted to be crunched up. But if I look at all these, to me, the ones that are interesting are the ones that have, I mean, I like them all. They're all like, children, but I like the ones that have space. And so that's a good question. I don't know, but I think I'm going to be working more on, like, what is that space, because it's kind of like the shadow, it's the thing that you're not making, but that is part of the piece. And it's almost like it's an added bonus that you don't have to make, but you're defining it or describing it, I guess. And I like that idea of making space, and of holding space. So I feel like that's something I'm like on the forefront of my mind right now. Anybody else? How are we doing for time? We're close. Yeah. Maybe we're good. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Amy.
Yeah, thanks so much for coming. Huh?
We're this talented.
Aww.
Amy, like, wow.
Thank you. You're showing.
Wow, I don't know how you do. All you do is parenting and this.
Aww.
You inspire me.
The nooks and crannies.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
I can't stop. It's the word for the day. It's really every single thing.